Those are mine, yes.
Oh, really good.
Yes, I rather like them, but unfortunately, we're not in the majority, Jerome. Apparently, they're a little too difficult for some people.
So how long have you been doing the triangles?
A long time. I was one of the first.
Man, that line is insane. I was one of the first doing the triangles. Absolutely love that movie. It's so real in the way it captures art school and the art world. But this scene has always stuck with me. I saw this a long time ago when I was in college. I only took a couple art classes. I wasn't an art student, but still from that time could relate and have been thinking about this ever since, because especially with social media, we talk a lot about specialization. Everyone tells you to niche down and find a niche to make content from. And, the same thing applies to a business. No one wants to hire somebody who does everything because it's very unlikely that they do any of those things very well. And even though you can, I'd like to consider myself a bit of a jack of all trades. But what I post is mostly model, actor, commercial images, right? Because you realize that that's kind of a necessity of running a business. People want to have trust that you're really good at what you do. My problem with specialization that I always thought about from watching this scene was the fact that it felt so limiting as a creative. Like, really, all I have to do is find one thing and make my whole career out of it. It felt limiting. It felt gimmicky. And I think that's partly the point of this scene as well, is to show that, artists a lot of times are just grifters and come up with a gimmick and, build a whole career off of it. So if you're like me and feel like you've struggled with having so many interests and how to balance them, I wanted to give you some perspective on how to find not just a specialty, a specific type of thing you shoot, but an approach you have to your work, a perspective you have on your work that can apply to all sorts of work you do and help you find a specialty that you actually care about. So there's a quote from one of my favorite authors, Rainer Maria Rilke. He's a poet, and he said to one friend the following: "Somehow I too must find a way of making things. Not plastic, written things, but realities that arise from the craft itself. Somehow I too must discover the smallest constituent element, the cell of my art, the tangible, immaterial means of expressing everything." So the way I think it's best to find this specialty and way of working that is unique to you is to find what is the cell of your art. What is the thing about your approach that's at the heart of it, the most true and unique to you, something that you see yourself applying across your work, that you might see already in your work, and that you can recreate for the things you do. So let's look at 3 ways for identifying the cell of your art. And I'll use myself as an example for these. Step 1 is to identify beliefs and philosophies you have about the way you work. This means that you should look at what is at the core of what you enjoy doing as a photographer or an artist in general, what you want to express, how you want to express, what you believe. This might mean, making a list of what are your core beliefs as an artist? What is your philosophy as an artist? They're difficult questions, but at the end of it, it should lead you to looking very practically, what is the through line through all of my photography? And for myself, it has a lot to do with capturing people. One of my core beliefs as a photographer is that I want to document something real, even within a fiction, even with something staged in the studio. I want to capture something real, some kind of real personality, something that shows who the person I'm working with really is, not just entirely a character, although obviously there's a place for that. But that might mean coming up with a character that is based on the person, so some way that I can capture a reality of this individual. And I love doing that with people. So when I look at the range of the work I do, that's always at the center, and that's always what I've gotten the most feedback about. Step 2 for finding your specialty is to identify any work you've done that really captures this cell of your art. Now that you've figured out what is at the core of what you do, what is it that drives you, what is it that is the foundational, element, the cell of what you create, what work have you already done that lets you show this the most? Again, using myself as an example, I saw the cell of my work in studio sessions like I just described before, with capturing something real about the models or artists that I work with. But the thing was, where could I show this the most? And one of the reasons I took a step back from wedding photography, at least, in as open public way as I did, because I would still take weddings here and there, was because I felt that there was a limit to how much I could capture that. It wasn't the most fulfilling place for me to express this cell of my art. At the wedding level, like I mentioned, I love documenting, which is what I loved about wedding, but that took the forefront. It was less of what the less orchestrating, less of the fictional side that I mentioned earlier that I loved about my work as well. That wasn't there. So I wanted to work in spaces that allowed me to have more control of the scene and then capture something raw and real within it. And I also love the interplay. I feel like I keep adding to this all of my art, but you see how complicated it can be, right? I wanted something where there was a interplay, a conversation between what was staged and what was real. And that's what brought me to more studio-centered work and just individual personality-centered work, where I could work with people to craft a little scene with them, but then also incorporate real elements of themselves. And so what allowed me to do that? Well, it was headshots, working with actors, working with models, doing commercial work. Like, these things allowed there to be a staged element, but then a real element at the center of it that allowed for this expression. And maybe I need to revise my earlier statement. It's funny doing these videos and kind of learning things as you go, right? It illustrates the very human aspect of us that we often don't know something until we have to teach it or share it with somebody else. And so here I am learning more about the cell of my own work. But the point being, the places where I could capture more of this real, layered in fictional aspect of work, this blending of reality that I like to do, I guess, was in the studio and that type of work. So that brings us to the final step. So now that I've identified some of that, the final step to finding your specialty is essentially how to get the work to get you there. And now you are to look at your portfolio and then intentionally fill in the gaps or just replace what isn't highlighting the cell of your art. So in this case for me, it meant not prioritizing event photography, let's say, on my public channels, right? There's still a page for events on my website because I do them, I'm open to them, I enjoy it, but that's not what I feel like is the most identifying of me, right, of my work. It shows the cell of my art in the sense that my event photography, I think, is very real and, obviously well composed and all this stuff, but like, I wouldn't say it's the epitome of my creative expression. And so once I realized that I liked working with individuals more and capturing something real about them, but having a staged kind of element to it, so like having characters that I'm playing with and fictional elements that I'm adding to the shoot, then I started building a portfolio towards that. So I removed certain things from my portfolio and I planned shoots that specifically added those things. I was looking to work more with models, and then even after that, like working a lot with models, I was like, I really like working with actors who can show some additional range of who they are and get into characters and feel like they're giving us something real. What I did was that I started looking for models that had either an acting background, or I could tell from their portfolios that they were comfortable with capturing a range of expressions, and also looking for actors to work with specifically, and really just trying to build a portfolio that showcased more of the range that I was hoping to capture and the scenes that I was hoping to create, so that I can keep using my really core abilities and sensibilities to better serve my prospective clients and collaborators. I'd like making this video now because I'm at another point of revamping what I'm doing in a way and positioning myself in a slightly different way. I'm sharing this at a time that I'm also still learning. And I think that's what's kind of beautiful about YouTube. I think that's what's beautiful about the creative process. And what I like about my work in general, right? I like a little fiction, I like a little reality. And so here, the fiction is that I'm obviously preparing this video. It's very composed in a way. But the reality is that I'm in some ways thinking out loud as I'm working off of some notes I made, but I'm also learning and on a journey myself. You know, I'm not someone who's coming down from the mountain to give you everything you need to know to follow me. It's just, hey, this is what I'm learning. This is what I'm trying to do. May it serve you well. So if this resonated with you, let me know. If you have any questions, let me know. I want to keep making videos that kind of build off of conversations and things we're all learning together. So I hope you got something from this one, and see you in the next one.